Hello, you're listening to Recalibrate and Go, a podcast brought to you by Aptude. I'm your host, Michael Foster. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Recalibrate and Go. It's been a couple of weeks. In terms of recalibration, actually, all of us here at Aptude have been doing some recalibrating ourselves. We're actually working on an entirely new marketing campaign. We developed a brand new series of ebooks about transportation, staffing, full stack development, and we're going to put them on our website, and we'll let you know where you can find them. They're going to be wonderful reads. They're going to keep you informed of all the latest trends, and it's just wonderful to be able to work on these and give them to you. Well, we're back today with Heather Noggle, and this time we're going to go deep into the hearts and minds of transportation, logistics, and compliance, which, if you're in the import-export business, if you're into logistics, there's a lot that has to happen in order to make everything A-okay in terms of, well, the legality of it. There's a lot of rules and regulations. And Heather has a bit of software that can help out with those compliance issues. When we recorded this, it was actually in May, and a lot of things have happened since then. If you've been paying attention to world events, our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who's been fighting the good fight. So in this particular podcast, we may not be addressing certain things just simply because when we recorded it, they haven't happened yet. And so the following gets into the nitty-gritty of logistics and compliance. And you'll probably hear me talk about this in the interview. We're very fortunate to have extremely intelligent guests because when it comes down to extremely technical issues, unfortunately, that is not where my expertise lies. I always say I'm the art guy, not necessarily the smart guy. And that's why we got to bring in very, very smart guests so they can help inform me and you simultaneously. So without further ado, it's Heather Noggle once again for part one of a part one podcast. We're not doing part two this time. It's just going to be a simple in and out. You're going to love it. Thanks for listening. Recalibrate and Go, brought to you by Aptude. 96% of the world's customers are not in the United States. If you don't believe me, you can ask Heather Noggle. She's come back to do a one-off podcast with us. Hey, Heather, how are you doing?
Good afternoon. How are you, Michael?
Doing good. We're doing good here. You know, it's interesting because I think the last time we talked, we were still all in the midst of the new normal. And I've been saying we're all sick of hearing that term, even new normal, adapting to working from home, coronavirus, and such. And here we are in May 2020, and things keep moving. We keep moving forward. Yeah. People still need to get stuff. And one of the things that you're an expert in, you obviously work in the export business.
Yes.
Yeah, in a sense. And you have a particular type of software that helps with compliance in terms of exporting data, import-export data.
We help customers control their data and then get it onto the documents that they need and do the proper screenings just so they make export compliance easy. And I can go more into detail after I put that where it goes as you ask more questions. So
yeah. Definitely. Okay,
exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I've been doing these podcasts for a bit. I always tell people I'm the art guy, not the smart guy. I'm the art director here at Aptude. And every now and then we start to meander into topics where I will admit I am definitely not the smartest guy in the room, probably not even the smartest guy in the state when it comes to certain things like this. So sometimes I got to lean heavily on our guests, but fortunately we always get the good people here. So let's talk a little bit about, well, just in general. So let's say you're a company and you're worried about compliance issues. You're worried about this. So from like square one, what do you tell them?
It's usually from one or two avenues. One is I'm not worried about compliance, and because I'm exporting, I need to be not necessarily worried, but aware. Or I am worried about export compliance. So first you have to know about it. But if you take a thing and you move it from one country to another country, it's an export. It doesn't matter if that's the United States to Canada, the United States to Mexico, or the United States to Crimea. That's an export. So there are certain things you have to know to follow regulations of our government. And then obviously some things on the importing country side that in order to get your goods into that country, you need to have the right information accompanying your shipment of products. So that at the base level is just knowledge is what you need to do. And there are even people at these conferences I attend sometimes, they'll show up in jumpsuits just to scare people into understanding about this thing called export compliance and that you are liable for following these regulations. So
They really do that?
they really
Jumpsuits?
do that.
Oh
Yeah,
my
the one
gosh.
company did that, and they had the orange ones one day, and then they had the old chain gang ones the next day. It was pretty funny. It's about 5-6 years ago I saw them do that.
Does the compliance change from year to year? Is it always
Well,
something that's updating, or what's going on with that? I mean, especially, I mean, obviously this year there might be some changes, but in general, is that part of it?
let's dive down right into a product.
You
There are
got
a
it.
couple different classifications that come on a product depending on how controlled it is, either by our Commerce Department or our State Department. So there's something called ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms regulations, to go with the State Department. So think of things that have military use in some capacity, so oversimplify. And then commerce are just goods. They could be widgets, they could be semiconductors, they could be anything along those lines that they're not governed by state. So every product is going to have some sort of classification there. And every product is also going to be placed on something called the harmonized tariff system. And that's a completely separate thing. That's, if you don't know much about compliance and you hear these two things, you might think they're interchangeable, and they're not. So the Census Department on the export side tracks our exports based on these numbers called the harmonized tariff system numbers, or in the United States, because we've got to be interesting, we call them Schedule B sometimes too. So you have two different numbers that are affixed to each product that you've got to track as you're exporting. Those are the kind of key pieces of data at the product level.
So in terms of what exactly you guys do,
So what do we do? Okay.
what exactly you guys do?
So I'm
We're
moving.
plugging ourselves.
I am moving data
You're
about
moving
because
data.
I'm moving products.
Right.
So when you're doing this, say you've got a shipment of 6 different products you're sending to somebody over in France. And each of these products needs to have its information classified to know whether it might need a license or if it will qualify for a license exception regarding either this ITAR that I was talking about or this commerce. So many goods are widgets and they don't need too much in this arena, but you still have to document things for the Census Department and also on your documentation that accompanies the product. Because again, we don't want our shipments held in the import country and we don't want to go to jail. So those are the two primary motivations for doing this and doing it well. And your third motivation, of course, is if you're exporting to reach this 96% of the customer potential in the rest of the world, you want to be able to do a lot of that if you've got a great product and it's in high demand. So you don't want anything in your way that would slow you down, either, jail or
Right.
just inefficient processes and anything that might cause you grief and woe later on down the line because it doesn't go as well as it should. Most people, when they think of exports or shipments, they just think of shipments. It's,
Right.
I get my thing over to UPS, or I get my thing to DHL, or I get my thing to FedEx, et cetera, and it goes. And it can work that way from the movement of the goods, but the piece that we work out is the data that makes the actual transactions happen so that there are no hiccups in the movement of the goods. That was
Now,
highly technical, so everyone, I
no,
apologize a bit because I
no,
did a lot in like 3, 4, 5 run-on sentences.
that's
So
okay,
yeah.
because the people who are listening, they're gonna totally get it. And it's funny too, because we talk about like U.S. exports. I've always tried to keep track of this stuff, and the truth is that I know that in terms of oil, our exports have gone up. But in terms of other things, I'm always trying to remember if we're going up or down, or if it's just doing it differently. And I know this year, obviously, that might change dramatically as well. But going back to the whole compliance thing, I think this is something like right off the bat. Are people aware of the compliance? Are they really nervous about it? Or is it something that they're like a deer in the headlights and they're like, oh crap, we got to do compliance?
If you're a big company, more likely you're going to know about export compliance, and often your risk management people will be involved in export compliance as well. You are required to have a program in place in your company, and that should include a letter from your top management stating the commitment of the company to export compliance, and an export compliance manual, and a whole lot of other things that go along with that, and keep that updated. You should be auditing your exports so that these one-off transactions, maybe you have 100 exports a year, maybe you have 10,000, maybe you have 100,000, but they all should follow through your process. So do people know about it? I hope so. I talked to some people who they learn about it and then they're very happy they find us because we can make that easy at any level of scale, make that to be something that provides value in the services that we help with, which some of the smaller companies, they'll be working on producing this data, this organized data and these documents in, say, Google Docs or Word or Excel, but you can't scale that. So if you have some growth in your company, you can't do any auditing, you can't look across trends, you can't, there's just so many things you can't do that we enable. And I know that that's just many companies who work with technology in any realm, that's what we hope to do, is to reduce duplication of effort, to increase, streamline, to increase productivity, and just generally give people control over what they need to control.
Yeah. Now, obviously, there's a lot of troubleshooting that probably has to, like if you go into a company, I know, for example, when we do support services and we bring in a team, a lot of times, and this is just a very vague observation, but just getting data to match from one database to the next tends to be
semantics.
the biggest problem. Yeah, semantics. Well, I'm always up for semantics, but is that the same thing that you discover with when you go into a company and you're starting to put in the software and you find that, just everything's a mess? Like if I'm a VP, we'll backtrack. If I'm a VP, what am I most concerned about?
You want to not be in jail, and you want to be making money.
You're making me nervous.
You really don't want to be in jail. And you also don't want anybody from your staff in jail, because that will really stop you from attracting new talent, I'm sure. But you want your bottom line to be where it needs to be, which means no shipment held at the borders. And you want good processes that are auditable, that can prove that whatever money you're spending to make these things go well, you're getting back well far and beyond in return on investment. I think that's going to be the C-suite and what they're going to care about in implementing some software so that they can grow their exports, because that's the goal, is to grow your exports, stay out of jail, improve your bottom line, and reach the rest of the world.
And I would imagine that even without having to manage all this data, just the whole import-export process is probably pretty difficult and has been changing dramatically over the last few years, because it seems like they keep coming up with new rules for what's gonna happen. Time for a break. I'm sure you feel the pressure of staffing for your IT projects with qualified software resources. It's difficult, we get it. You need teams that will sustain and allow you to ramp up and ramp down in a manner that doesn't see your critical knowledge walk out of the door when the project is complete. So how do you sustain support as you transition from building your critical application to supporting your strategic applications? With us, Aptude, we've got 24/7 application support, and we can help. Reach out to us. Visit our website at aptude.com or give us a call. We're here. We're waiting. Aptude.
There are some new rules, and when you get into specific areas of goods, it can be more interesting. I know I was working with a company who worked with agricultural products, and certain of those documents that we would be asked to produce are things that have to print out on those old carbon copy forms. You remember those from when we were young?
Yeah, yes, I do.
The forms are still, there's not an electronic message that you can send. And so therefore you've got to put these things in these boxes, and it's got to line up on paper that you pre-purchase. So you have varying levels of technical capabilities within government agencies based on the products that are going. So those are interesting. They're things we can do, but they're interesting things to tackle. And then there's when you are going out of the United States, and if your goods qualify in one of these groupings that I started to talk really esoterically about, then you have to report the shipment, the pieces that qualify, to the U.S. government Census Department. So that too is something that's a button click in our software, since it's mostly the same data that you're putting on your documents. And so we enable those capabilities and ability to keep all of your documents. Even if you didn't produce them in our system, you can have basically it's like a little folder area where you store everything pertinent to one single shipment.
I know what our techs do a lot of times, because when you're dealing in logistics, you're dealing in transportation, you're dealing in shipping, everybody's got their own system. And I'll go to a question here in a minute about like how archaic the system is in real life. But I know for the fact that when people are using carbon copy, or they're just using handwritten notes, a lot of the stuff that we develop on our end is basically using artificial intelligence, using these sort of applications where you just take a photo of the letter or the note, and then it just literally digitizes the information and then shoots it off into an email. that sort of thing. And I imagine and if 96% of the customers of the world are not in the United States, is that a big issue? Is basically everybody still using carbon, or is it not as bad as I'm worried that it is?
Let's move beyond carbon. That's a government requirement in the ag department in a very specific area. What we do see, though, some of our more enterprise customers who really need a lot of help getting this to be scalable, beautiful, flowing, they are often on older legacy tech like we've talked about before. So
yes.
Some AS400 still in play, haven't navigated over to modern tech. And so their capabilities there in shuttling data automagically, they have some work to do, and we are there to help them to make this as streamlined as possible, because we've seen it all, we've done it all. I mean, you have several years on an industry and several years in its tech, you know how to make it better too. So that's another thing we're doing, is in addition to doing all these other things, we're modernizing our own software. I probably alluded to that last time we spoke. So
yeah, I think you and I had talked about how if you're thinking about it, you have to do it. It's time.
Yep.
I believe, yeah. And that was actually the last thing we had talked about. But you're always having to. Getting back a little bit, in even dipping into our previous conversation, talking about, obviously the way the virus has changed the world. Mm-hmm. Is your particular industry, are you seeing major changes, not just in compliance, but even in the way data is being transferred, hiccups? Have you seen anything dramatically shift, or has it really just been business as usual over the last few months?
I think for us, since we've been working on new product development, we haven't noticed too much, because we also work from home and always have. So the staff hasn't really had much change with the way we do our things. However, our customers are certainly lower volume in their operations than, say, they were in February. So that's been interesting. And as some of them have been, some have been completely shut down. And as they return, guess what? They're very busy as they return.
Right.
So everything's got to be seamless. It's got to work perfectly. And they're in a whole lot of pain if it doesn't. And so that's another nice thing, is if you've got a nice solid software package and you have your processes all built and you know how these things interplay, then coming back after a month off and having to scale into where you would have been, that's far more doable than if you're doing these things manually.
Exactly.
So I'd like to think we're here, we're ready, we're poised, we know what we're doing.
In terms of the export compliance program, which that you basically have that software, that's in the end what it does. What are some of the major changes that you've done over the last couple of years? Like you said, you're getting ready to roll this out. Like what can people expect?
All right, let's go geeky here for a minute.
Let's do it.
So modern tech stack, ours is Node.js sitting on top of Couchbase, which is a NoSQL database, written serverless, and Lambda sitting on AWS. So if you want to hand us 1 million requests today, we don't care. We can handle that. So that's what we've built. That's not something we had before. And that piece of software, this is a very specific thing we haven't really talked about yet. It does a specific function called restricted party screening. Basically, the government, the US government and many others have regulations of thou shalt not ship to. And so doing this screening enables you to be confident that you're not shipping to naughty agents, naughty actors, meaning people who are not allowed to receive goods. So we've got that piece completely scalable, ready to go. And we're working on modernizing our doc generation as well to be at that scale and at that level. So super exciting.
It's funny because like people who aren't in the tech world, and they don't understand how exciting it is to be developing something new that's going to make everyone's life easier. We get a little, how should we say, complacent, or we just expect technology to always work. And we don't realize just how much effort and mind power and just hours it takes to make something that seems just like the air. It just works.
The simpler it looks, the more time it took.
Exactly. Well, Heather, thank you so much for coming back.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Once again, a special thank you to Heather Noggle for being our guest once again. I hope you found it very informative. I certainly did. I didn't realize all the ways you can go to jail for being in import and export. I had no idea. Maybe not. I don't know. But I'm like concerned now for myself, and I'm not even in the business. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, If you like the podcast, and I sure hope you do, please subscribe. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcast. We're on TuneIn. We're on SoundCloud. You can't miss us. We're pretty much everywhere. And we're going to be taking a break. We have one more podcast coming up, and that's we're going to be talking to my friends from Reuters Events. Great group of guys. You're going to love listening to them. They're from London, and they're very funny. And we just had a blast talking to them. And that's going to be coming up. And then afterwards, we're going to take a little bit of a break for a bit, but we will be back after that break. In the meantime, if you think you should be on our podcast, hey, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me. I'm Michael Foster over at Aptude. My email address is mfoster, M-F-O-S-T-E-R, @aptude.com, and that's APTUDE.com. Yeah, you know something about tech, you know something about the kinds of IT that we work in, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have you on the show. Reach out. Tell us why you should be on the show, and hey, we just might put you on. Actually, we could use a few new guests, so we would love for you to reach out. So be sure to do that. Be sure to check out our website at aptude.com with all the latest and greatest news and information about technology and IT. We have a very robust blog and news section with up-to-the-date articles about everything and anything you need to know about Python or robotic process automation, Power BI, you name it, you think it, we're doing it. So be sure to check that out. Be sure to check out our website and subscribe to our podcast. And like I said, we have one more coming up, and they're going to take a little bit of a break for a while. So during that break, be sure to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Once again, this is Michael Foster from Recalibrate and Go, brought to you by Aptude.